This episode is made possible by NetSuite by Oracle and Brex, the AI-powered spend platform.
Hello, this is Chip Zint, CFO of Deluxe, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 1005.
So when I was at Salesforce, I ran a team of 600 people in 13 different countries across the globe. Coming into DISQO, I had a team of about 20 focused on traditional finance, controllership, FP&A, effectively those. So what I did is really just came in and tried to understand what we were doing, how we were structured, how we're supporting the business, how we're supporting the investors, what are the things that we're doing, but then also looking at the gaps that we had. And luckily, there was an early view to put a team called RevOps in place, which obviously I had the background in.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Scott Henderson, CFO of DISQO. In the early years of Scott Henderson's career, the dotcom bubble burst, leaving the tech industry in turmoil and many young professionals uncertain about their futures. Despite the chaotic climate, Henderson decided to take a calculated risk by joining yet another dot-com venture. This time, the company was a modest enterprise with 300 employees and $25 million in revenue. At the time, it was known as Salesforce.com. Henderson's gamble paid off as Salesforce grew from a promising startup into a global tech giant. You'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. CFOs and controllers, does expense management feel like a necessary evil? It's time to switch to Brex. Brex automates and accelerates spend management with easy-to-use corporate cards, travel, expense management, and bill pay, all on one AI-powered platform. Brex makes it easy to boost efficiency and compliance enterprise-wide and free up your managers, employees, and accounting team for higher impact work. Top companies from startups to enterprises are using Brex to automate manual work and transform their finance operations. We're talking DoorDash, Robinhood, Airtable, and countless other industry leaders. Ready to join them? Switch to AI-powered spend management at Brex.com. Hello, we're speaking with Scott Henderson, CFO of DISQO. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Jack. Happy to be here.
Scott, as always, we're going to ask you to look back, and we're interested in having you zero in on some of those experiences you feel prepared you to become a finance leader. I want to just tip your hand a little bit. Scott was 20 years at Salesforce. Scott, take us back. What were those experiences?
Jack, first of all, thanks for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. So it's hard to say one thing. So it's, a combination of a lot. My career actually started off in the mid 90s. I was in graduate school in Washington, D.C., and my best friend growing up was at Stanford getting his MBA, and I was figuring out what the heck I'm going to do. And he's like, you got to come out to the Bay Area. This internet thing, there's something to it. So got in my car, crashed on his floor for a few days, and lo and behold, I got a job at this company that, in retrospect, I'm like, should I have stayed there or not? That company was called Apple. And so I was in their worldwide R&D group, reconciling headcount and those types of things. But the internet was exploding. And so for me, I want to be a part of the mix. And so I took a couple different jobs at startups as an assistant controller, running FP&A, those types of things. And so actually the experience at Apple kind of allowed me to understand like, what a big company looks like, but then going back to smaller companies, just the, sort of chaos that was involved, trying to figure stuff out, way different than what you experience at a bigger company. One of the companies that I went to, actually, we filed our S1. I was running FP&A. We were close to going public, and the dotcom busted. And so that was sort of, that was definitely a learning moment, but allowed me to really understand what was required to take a company public. And soon thereafter, I joined this other startup that I was at for 20 years, and that startup was called Salesforce.
Well, that puts it nicely in a nutshell for us. Your early years are interesting because you stayed at Salesforce, of course, for 20 years, but initially you're a year at Apple, and then you're a year at another company, and a year at another company. Tell us something about your mindset back then. Were you really trying to discover whether it's going to be finance, whether it's going to be something else?
It was always finance, Jack, but I wasn't sure exactly what or where. So, growing up, my dad was a pilot. My mom, finished high school. I had no clear direction. I was kind of figuring stuff out on my own. And so, I was trying to figure it out, and, being at a big company, smaller company, what I know that really kind of got me going was the energy at a smaller company. Apple is a fantastic company, but when I was with them, they're on the verge of going bankrupt.
Isn't that, this is like 96, 97. I'm sorry to interrupt. And I was going to ask you, is he just coming back into the business?
Yeah,
Is he
so the CEO at the time was Gil Amelio, and Steve Jobs was not back yet, and I departed before he returned. But I got to experience it. Like, it was an amazing place. I loved it. I loved being there. It's about an hour and 20-minute commute. I was living in the city and commuting down to Cupertino, and that got to be a bit old. But yeah, being at smaller companies, you're closer to the executives, closer to the board, and they're all learning experiences. And so, bouncing around wasn't ideal, but there was just so many different opportunities back then, and finding the right spot where I felt comfortable, making a difference. And so, that company that, we got to about $110 million of revenue, filed the S1, and we were ready to go. But turned out, things just didn't quite work out. And that was a learning lesson. And I was actually kind of hesitant going to this other .com that had a name in it. Salesforce.com was the name of that company back then.
Now, you climbed rather quickly. I mean, it was in short order. You were an assistant controller in the late 90s at some of these other companies you mentioned. You come into a controllership role. You land inside Salesforce. Sort of, is it an FP&A role, or where?
So they were looking to build out their FP&A function. The other roles were, a bit more on the accounting side, a bit, less on the business side. And for me, I wanted to be closer to my roots are FP&A. I'm not a CPA. I don't have an accounting background, although I did a lot of it over the years, and learn from people over the years. So that was great. But yeah, joining Salesforce, like, I was brought in to effectively help them build financial planning, which they didn't do very effectively. And when I got there, I realized, wow, there's an opportunity to really make an impact here. And so I was, back then, being an Excel whiz kid was, very hard to find. And I happened to learn those skills at one of the companies that I was at doing M&A. But anyway, so when I joined Salesforce, $25 million in revenue, about 300 employees. And, they were hiring, they were growing, but kind of a bit haphazard. And so I was fortunate enough to be put in position to work with the sales team, work with the marketing team. Obviously, I was in finance, and I was given the opportunity to build a integrated financial planning capacity based model. And that model effectively ended up running the company because we realized that, looking at the leads, looking at how many account executives we had, how much they could book, what's the translation to revenue recognition, that it was all kind of connected together in terms of, the salespeople to how much marketing we needed to actually how many people we needed to hire. And so back in the early days, I was in a room weekly or more often than that with our CFO, Steve Cakebread, Mark Benioff, the sales leader, Jim Steele, and many others. And we would look and say, wow, okay, how fast do we want to grow? What markets, what segments? And anyways, I could get more into that later.
Looking back on this, you're kind of architecting what would become the model for cloud computing, the subscription model. And you're on the inside, and at the same time, it's how it's being sold on the outside. How whether companies are going to wrap their head around paying a subscription versus an on-premise solution. And you guys are pioneering this. And how am I doing? Am I?
You are right. You are right on track. Yeah.
So you're making it up as you go along. Is what I'm trying.
Yeah.
Like there must have been like the sales team is coming back saying that we seem to. The finance people or the sales people seem to really understand this. If we could just tweak it a little bit and position it this way or price it this way, it would make better sense to them in the environment they're currently in to adopt it. I'm trying to understand what the conversation would be like. Can you illustrate that better than me?
Yeah, no, you're definitely on, in the zip code there. Yeah, so for us, what we realized is that there was plenty of opportunity out there, and granted, we were making it. I mean, there was a lot of hard work being done to pave that path of subscription of the SaaS. Our product wasn't just selling itself; we needed people to get out there and actually sell it. But at that point in time, what we realized is that there's top of the market, lower market, and so we started segmenting the our sales team a little bit differently, and then also looking at geographic expansion and how fast we could grow there. And so that was really helpful for us understanding like where the opportunities were, and then where could we go fastest, what segments, what regions, but also what geos.
Was there any fork in the road that it was a tough decision? And I'm sure there were so many of these, but it was a tough decision to make. And now looking back, it's kind of like so obvious that you made the right decision, but at the time it was so widely debated and perhaps put on the back burner longer. Or
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a different time then. I think what we were trying to figure out is, are we going too fast or are we going too slow? And Mark actually had this theory in his head, which kind of proved itself true up until I would say a few years ago. But he sort of was in the mantra like every account executive that we bring in should on average bring in about 800,000 of bookings or revenue, if you will. And so that was sort of the math that guided us. But I think what we probably could have done maybe more effectively is to but again, at the time, it wasn't like super important. It was about growth. It wasn't about growth and profit. And remember back in the day, like or back then, we changed it where we were collecting up front. So cash wasn't an issue. We were growing so rapidly. Cash wasn't a problem. Our margins weren't like super great from an operating perspective, but those other areas were, growing like gangbusters. And so in today's environment, it's a bit different, right? It's growth, but not at all cost, right? It's growth with profit, or at least with cash. So it's a bit different today versus then.
Customer renewals, customer retention, lifetime customer value, are all these things that you're seeing come to be, the measurements associated with them?
Yeah, so that was a learning for us back in the early day too. Is it's not just about adding. It's about, you have this churn, or as we call it, attrition of our customers, and so that was sort of the leaky bucket, if you will, and so we also learned that we could build a renewals team to focus on our install base. And while the salespeople focus predominantly on the new business, the renewals team would then focus on our install base. And that install base obviously gets to be very large. And, the more that leaks, the harder you're, swimming upstream. So that was, a learning in our model that we had to adapt over time. I think, as we, we're growing so rapidly, thinking about the ramp time of our salespeople and how to improve win rates, how to decrease ramp time, how to decrease attrition. All those things, add up, when you get a big enough sales army in place.
Looking back, why was it such a good fit for you? And I'm going to assume it was a wise investment. 20 years, you must think about that. Why was it such a good fit for you for that period?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why I stayed. There I would say the two main ones are the people. Like, some of my best friends, today are people that I was going to battle with. Actually, we just hired where I'm at now, a CRO, and Neil Graham, and he was at Salesforce 20 years ago, and we sat across from one another when there were a few of us, and we were reminiscing about that the other night. But yeah, just really like wonderful people, smart people, like dedicated, working hard, and that was really the thing that kind of keeps you going day in, day out. But you got to have the challenges, and you got to have the opportunities, and I had those, and I was able to start out as a senior analyst, rise to manager, senior manager, all the way up. And when I left, a couple of years ago, I was EVP of a group called Revenue Operations. But there's a lot of spots in between there.
You do sort of get very involved in the revenue operations piece of this. You could have gone another path if you wanted to. It seemed like that was your true specialization after a while, or no?
Yeah. So I, back in the day, as I mentioned, I was FP&A, but I worked very, very closely with sales. So I had a really strong connection with them. As the company grew, people become more specialized, and I had the opportunity. I asked my boss back then, like, how do I grow my career? What do I need to do? And he said, well, Scott, you clearly have the analytics, FP&A chops. And he said, here's what if I were to guide you, I would say, spend some more time doing accounting, controllership, get involved more in the operations, and then finally international experience. Like, if you kind of check all those four boxes, he said, I could see, people in that position, being able to, take a CFO type of role. And I said, great. So about 6 weeks later, our CFO is like, we're going to be building out our operations in Europe. And so my boss at the time, who effectively ran revenue operations and sales finance, said, "Hey, Scott Henderson mentioned to me that he's interested in, growing his career." And long story short, what was supposed to be a 2-year assignment going over there, building out the, finance team, ended up to be 7 years of amazing time in the center of Europe and Switzerland.
You relocated over there? Was it an entirely different job, or were you dealing with the same people?
It was pretty different job. So back there, when I was in San Francisco, I was pretty much corporate finance, corporate FP&A, connections to CFO, CEO, head of sales, and then going over there, you're more focused on the operations in Europe and then also internationally. So there was an ebb and flow of how the international structure was set up, but really it was about growing that and establishing the international operations to a new level. And so for me, it was, continuing along the lines of FP&A, but with a focus on international. So I had the Europe team and the Asia Pacific team in Singapore and the Japan team reporting into me. And then that ended up growing as well and taking over as a regional finance leader for Europe. But we were expanding in multiple countries and multiple regions, and it was a bit of a different role.
Scott, as you grew in your career there, did you begin talking more to analysts, or were you brought in to present with different communities of stakeholders, or what were you?
Yeah, I would say I was still predominantly internal facing. I was, I would say the key finance partner to, the international leaders. It wasn't so much customer facing, if you will. This is, predominantly, the blocking and tackling of, setting up operations, but also providing insight and guidance and showing them how we did things at HQ and try to replicate that in the different regions. So they could sort of be, raise their bar to a different level, so they could start growing more rapidly, more productively, and more profitable.
The hires you made over time that perhaps were outside of Salesforce, what were the characteristics of the candidates that you most often found attractive or wanted to bring into the company?
You're asking for people that I brought into Salesforce, or yeah,
and I know it wasn't necessarily just you, but what were those candidates? What did they have in common? What is it that you saw?
They had to be smart. And so how do you do that? Well, it's just an assessment of their skills through conversations, but almost more important or equal importance is the connection. Like, because we were growing so fast, because we we're spending so much time in the office, you had to connect with people. Like, are these people that you can go have dinner with, or, have a beverage with, if you will? Could you count on them? How could you demonstrate that they can count on you? Because, the growth, the sustained, durable growth that, that Salesforce has, the journey it's been on, like you need people that are committed, and, and those are the people, those are the sort of the qualities that I really looked for. Of course, you needed to balance that too, where, you needed some completely off the wall, smart, analytical, people that could do programming, that could do things that you couldn't do, but there's still that common characteristic of, yeah, this guy or girl, yeah, I want to, support them, grow their career, give them opportunities, and have fun. Because, and I think that was, what's kept Salesforce so interesting over the years is we worked our tails off, but we always had fun too. And the people at the end of the day, or the end of the quarter, end of the month, you would celebrate that success. And Mark kind of instilled that at the top. And I think hiring good people is so super, super important. It's not, it's obviously experience is important, but it's really, to me, the connection that you have with somebody.
Yeah, just as you explain that to us and express it to us, the unique culture that Salesforce has created. I'm speaking specifically of finance right now. Intel, and interestingly, I know a few of the Salesforce veterans that we've had on also have Intel on their resume. That's not your story, but these are unique finance cultures in Silicon Valley. Do you disagree with me, or are there others you would put on that list in terms of high tech finance culture being such an important for those companies that have really achieved something?
Yeah, I think there are, there's many wonderful companies in the Valley. Back in the late '90s, HP actually was an amazing had an amazing finance arm. The Cisco's, the Intels, even a company that's not around, but Sun Microsystems. Uh, those are all fantastic, companies to gain your experience and have established really great finance leadership throughout the Valley.
The next step, what led you to finally, leave this company and step into a CFO role? One would imagine it could have been any number of C-suite roles. Could have been a chief strategy officer, chief operating officer, chief revenue officer, or no, it had to be finance.
Good question. It could have been. It could have been a couple different things. Uh, you know, Getting to the 20-year mark makes one kind of reevaluate life, if you will. And I've got two young, amazing boys that are 14 and 12 now. And, I just got to the point where it's, do I want to spend the rest of my career at Salesforce, which is a great answer? Do I want to do something completely different? Or do I want to, do something that, is finance related or operations related? The last 7 years at Salesforce, I was in a pretty operational role. And in that, I just felt like I had an opportunity to bring something to a company that maybe most traditional CFOs don't have. And when I went to DISQO, where I'm at now, I've been there for a little over a year and a half. I think that was one of the differentiators that the CEO, that the investors were looking to, is to bring somebody in that had a finance background at a well-established company, but also had a RevOps type of background. Because, again, that when you look at, companies that have done well, it's about growth, growth, and so I think they were looking to have a CFO that could partner with the CRO, with that team, to really think about growth and profit versus just profit. So not to say that others don't, but I think that was a bit of a differentiator. And when I talk to other people, from time to time, I think that's where sort of their heads are, is that it's a different world these days, and having that type of background is not like something that puts you, it's not like you get shuffled under the deck. A lot of times you get placed on the top of the deck.
Well, that's great. Thank you for that. We're going to move to the business segment where we begin by just asking you, tell us about DISQO. What is this company about? What are its offerings?
Sure. So DISQO was founded in 2015. It's a brand experience platform company. So we help marketeers, advertisers, brands, companies understand their touch points with the customer. And so we've got our own audience. So we've got our products are powered by, we've got about a little over 2 million consumers that opt in to our consumer data platform. And those companies then tap into our audience to understand sentiment and behavior to really understand if their campaigns, if that whatever they're doing is actually moving the needle. Because at the end of the day, it's about driving more revenue, and how can you best do that? And we help them understand that.
Now, was it a recruiter or were you a networked? How did it happen?
Yeah, it's interesting. It was through a recruiter. Friend of mine who was also a colleague at Salesforce, Brett Queener. He's at a VC company, and they were one of the early investors in DISQO. So I think he put in a good word for me.
So you arrive in 2022, I guess. Pandemic is winding down, hopefully, at that time. But can you just give us a sense of the finance organization you stepped into? And just, again, given the last 2 decades of experience that you have looking into this smaller company, how you'd organize it, or, what you'd like to change or what you'd like to keep, anything?
So coming into 2022, there was a lot of tailwinds for a lot of companies, but that all kind of seemed to change in 2022. And so in joining DISQO was sort of, I was sort of joining when at the peak, and as interest rates are really starting to change and putting a lot of pressure, economic headwinds on consumers, on companies, et cetera. So for me, obviously, when I was at Salesforce, I ran a team of 600 people in 13 different countries across the globe. Coming into DISQO, I had a team of about 20, and we were focused on traditional finance, controllership, FP&A, effectively those. So what I did is really just came in, tried to understand what we were doing, how we were structured, how we're supporting the business, how we were supporting the investors, what are the things that we're doing, but then also looking at the gaps that we had. And luckily, there was an early view to put a team called RevOps in place, which obviously I had the background in. But, for me, there's all the different areas of finance are super important. But from a company that wants to really grow, like RevOps is the glue that connects the front office to the back office and helps enable growth. And so there's been, definitely more investment in that area than others, and more planned investment. But we're doing all that we need to do, and getting the most out of the team. And I'm sure that having a new individual come in, kind of ruffles the feathers a little bit. But I think I'm fortunate that the team that I joined had really, really smart, capable people, and so far so good. I've been here for a year and a half, as I said, and we're in good shape, and we've made a lot of difference in the company. Like, finance is a strategic partner. We're not just doing reporting and bookkeeping. We're doing a lot of different things.
Can you tell us, and again, just given your background, RevOps, and how you've explained, you're someone who really understands operations and how to grow and scale, the needs of that and how to invest. But you also might as you step in as a CFO, you have to maybe invite yourself to certain meetings or make the organization know that there's a seat for finance here because we really need to understand better or help you come to some decisions. Can you share with us? Did anything get changed organizationally, or maybe you decided that there was a meeting that the company would benefit from having weekly instead of monthly or something? I don't know, but
Yeah. Uh, how much time do we have? 4 more hours? Yeah. So finance can do a lot of different things to enable the company to help drive growth. And so um, for me, it was really helping us understand the business better. That included me inserting myself, as you said, into more discussions, inserting my team into more discussions so that we can better predict but provide more insight so that we could either grow more effectively or in the case of the last, call it 18 months, manage our costs more effectively to get to a level of break even or operating cash flow positive while trying to grow as fast as you can. But there's a fine balance there. So a lot of it also is education. Like the business didn't know how we were forecasting revenue per se, and we weren't frankly very good at it either because there is some complication. It's not just straight SaaS. You hire a person, they sell, and you book revenue, and then so like it's a lot more. The business is more usage based, so it makes modeling that a bit differently. And so, again, inserting the team, but also, yeah, we weren't doing things that you see. I'll say enterprise software companies doing, and so RevOps leads a lot of that in terms of forecast calls, in terms of looking at our attrition, if you will, our renewals, really partnering with the business. But we're providing the tools, the insights to help us make better decisions that and hopefully more rapidly than we were doing before. And yeah, we're in a lot better shape for sure. Like I think we all feel really good about where we're at.
was there, and we always like to ask it this way, is there a particular metric or was there a number that you determined wasn't getting the attention it needed across the organization, or as those people, the finance team was inserted or embedded more tightly, were your conversations with them, we have to help them understand why this particular metric or number actually matters?
Yeah, I think the team, the company was actually reporting on a lot of different metrics, but what are the ones that mattered? And for us being a usage based company, net revenue, net dollar retention, super important. But really understanding that to a different level than we did before, and so that really was an area that we needed to focus on, but also think about our comp design in that way, in terms of the new business versus existing, setting up our territories in a similar way. So those are some of the things. But in addition to that, like there wasn't this real, I'll say, focus on account executives and growth and capacity. And so for me, as a where I came from, like bookings per AE was pretty much the number one metric that the company was looking at, and so kind of bringing that in and having that as a key metric to the company too is super important.
Were you surprised? Did you have the visibility you needed, or have you sought to, uh, whether it's new technology or whether it's a different way of reporting the numbers, have you sought to lengthen your lines of sight one way or another? Because you realized I can't see these numbers just once a month. We need to see these daily. Is it something like that?
Yeah, for sure. Again, the reporting was pretty good, but getting it more real time in dashboards. The technology, actually, where I'm at, they use a lot of technology from my prior company. So, but probably not quite using it in the way that I was accustomed to. That is probably more world class. So we're doing things now, and it's helping us, from a business, understand it better. Like, really, what is a definition of a booking? I had a clear understanding before, but this is a different space. We're a different industry. We're more usage based. So, helping define that a bit more with, obviously sales. When sales knows rules, they can perform better. You get the right results, but establishing that across the company and having them know what the key metrics are helps the board understand us a lot better too. So, but you're right, having more information, real time information, super critical, and we're doing a lot better than we were, but there's so much further to go, and technology is changing every day, and that's the one constant we can count on.
Have you found your mindset when it comes to developing your team, your talent? In a smaller firm at Salesforce, of course, there are lots of opportunities for people to continue to grow and develop. I would imagine it's something of a challenge, or something that you probably were knowledgeable about, but it's a different. You're dedicating more time, less time. You're using that time differently and making certain that people can be developed the way they need to be.
Yeah, I think there's more mentorship, coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's also, you may not be able to, move from this to this to this, or take an opportunity maybe as much as you do at a larger company. But what you get exposed to is something different. So having exposure to, and I don't mean it this way, but daily exposure to a C-suite person like a CFO, or being in a meeting with the CFO, the CEO, co-founder, CTO, CRO, like those are opportunities that, you're not going to get if you're at a bigger company. And so those are the things that you can learn that a person can take back and help grow their career. And having those opportunities over the years, when I look back on my career, like I learned a lot in many different areas, but I learned a heck of a lot working under a CFO, at $100 million company that was plugged into so many different areas, and working with the board, working with the leadership team, and being close to that person, like really helped me understand like how important finance plays in decision making in a company.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for that, Scott. I'm going to jump to our finance strategic moment question, where we're just looking for one moment in time during your long career that you experienced some insight or a moment of thought that led you to, I don't know, pursue an opportunity, avoid a risk in finance. Anything come to mind?
I think the one thing that I would also talk about is, this is probably 5 years ago. My team, we had about 150 people in RevOps. As my boss earlier said, Meredith Schmidt, she used to say, all roads leads through RevOps, because at Salesforce, all the revenue gets booked through the revenue operations team. Every dollar of booking, every dollar of compensation gets booked through that team. So that team is touching a lot of different points of the company. And we had roughly, I'll call it 5 years ago, maybe it was 6. We were integrating 2 significant companies, MuleSoft and Tableau. More acquisitions on the horizon. We needed to go faster. and integrate them into Salesforce, into our CPQ. We also were going into new markets, the government space, and it seemed like everything was coming through our team, and so we really needed to help the company prioritize a bit differently. And so I, connected with our CFO, Mark Hawkins, and our COO, and just saying, like, there is no way that we can run all of these projects at the same time. Like, we need to be really strategic about what's the most important to the company. And so it really, kicked off this corporate planning process that we weren't doing before. It was a pretty intense time. I mean, the team literally went from 150 employees to 600 employees in 2 short years. And that was, the company has always been growing, but for the growth on that particular team, like it was intense because we were involved in every major project of the company and had to deliver. And we helped kick off a corporate planning, strategic planning process that wasn't in place before.
$37,025.1. These are the 3 numbers to remember to get the visibility and control you need to make the right business decisions instantly. 37,000. That's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down expenses. 1. Because your business is one of a kind, you should get a customized solution for all of your KPIs in one efficient system and with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need, all in one place. Right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance, absolutely free, at netsuite.com/KPI. That's netsuite.com/KPI.
We're going to jump to what we refer to as our mentoring round. We'll ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We want you to think back when you first stepped into this role, and we touched on this a little bit earlier. But what didn't you expect? And I always ask you, like, well, if you could go back in time and tell yourself that first 30 days back in 2022, what is it that you might not have known about? So this is part of the CFO role.
Yeah. I think there was concern on my part and the people that were hiring me that I'm coming from a big company and going to a small company with, not quite the resources or, things as well as defined. So I kind of knew that. And so you have to be scrappy. And I think going back in time, like, I knew that. But what I really probably would have done differently is to become really compartmentalized with my understanding of different areas. Because, when you come into a new role, you're very much like, I'm going to learn, I'm going to connect with people. But I think I really needed to, if I were to go back, like, compartmentalize, okay, this area, like, I know really well, but it's fractured, or this area is running really well. But I was probably more peanut butter spread across, because I thought it was just more important for me to learn every aspect.
Nice insight. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us. You shared a few personal items. 2 sons, lived in Europe 7 years. Anything people generally don't know about you, however, on the from the outside world?
Yeah, well, I think if the people that know me, beyond my two kids, which are, definitely life priority for me, and beyond work, like it's almost like a three-legged stool for me. It's work, family, and self. And so that self for me is always hard to balance, because the other two tend to take a priority for me. But when I'm not, working, when I'm, not coaching baseball or, hanging out with my boys, I love to play golf. I played competitively through college, but I'm not as good as I used to be, but I still like to get out there and be competitive against friends. And
Did you play when you were in Europe?
I work too much. That's the problem. Is over the years I tend to work again. The golf hasn't been a priority, but I hope to keep it sort of on the back burner to play again one day.
We always like to ask if you got a book selection for us or a resource, something that you enjoyed or influenced your thinking one way or another, anything?
Yeah. So for me, I'm not going to point to one book because there's been so many. Yeah. For me, like I spend a lot of time reading, current things that are going on currently with the economy, the economist, a lot of, market research, things from analysts, things like that. So for me, that's probably where I spend most of the time. And when I do find time to read, it's usually something about being a better parent, yeah, or something about health, or something about instilling stillness in your brain, so you can deal with all the chaos in life.
Can you characterize the current economy for us?
Interesting. Hopefully getting better, but I feel like we've got a grounding. And, 6 months ago, it was very hard to predict. And at least now it feels like it's slightly up, neutral, slightly down, but it's not, it doesn't feel like it's 12 or 24 months out till things improve.
We're up to our final question. We ask you to look forward finally. We're wondering what your priorities are for the coming 12 months.
To drive balanced growth within our company. We're in a good spot where we control our own destiny. That took 18 months to get to, which is a lot of hard work by many people. And, the fun thing is we're talking about, durable growth again, and excited to be talking about that.
Scott Henderson, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate the time. Have a great weekend.
Hello, listeners. As you may know, we recently passed the 1,000 episode milestone, and the fact is, we've published well over 1,000 episodes over the years, but we only prescribe a number to episodes featuring CFOs, because we know this is truly what has distinguished us over time. We're a platform dedicated to the people who actually occupy the CFO office. And to you, our listeners, who are very often seeking to better understand the roots of finance leadership. Well, it's with this in mind that we're pleased to announce the release of our new book titled The CFO 500, where we have profiled 500 of the more than 1,000 CFOs that have participated with us over the years. And you remember Siskel and Ebert, the movie guide? Leonard Moulton had his movie guide as well. Well, that's sort of the concept of what's inspired this volume, the CFO 500. Think of it as a reference volume where you can quickly thumb through the 500 one-page CFO profiles and cherry pick out the interviews that matter to you. How so? Well, each CFO page profile includes an individual QR code that allows you to instantly access the audio interview with the CFO that most intrigues you. Or maybe it's a particular industry. Just like that movie guide you used to reach to on a day when nothing much was going on, here's a way to quickly reference the interviews that matter most to you. The CFO 500 is now available for $29.95 and can only be purchased via CFOThoughtLeader.com. So visit us at CFOThoughtLeader.com. Thank you.